So the reading for today from the book Rays of the One Light is entitled Reason versus Intuition. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. Jesus, when addressing his critics, appealed to reason and common sense. In his training of the disciples, however, he, like all great masters, encouraged in them the development of a higher faculty, soul intuition. For it is only by intuition that spiritual perceptions are achieved. In chapter 16 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, we find Jesus drawing on the intuition of his disciples by asking them who they thought he was in reality. They immediately understood that what he wanted from them was a subtle answer, not some obvious reply based on his nationality, sex, and the like. Peter it was, at last, who understood and answered the question on its intended level, the spiritual. "Thou art the Christ," he said, "the Son of the living God." And Jesus turned to him, saying, "Blessed art thou, Simon, son of Jonah, for not by human nature was this truth revealed to thee, but by my heavenly Father. And I tell thee this also, thou art Peter, which is to say, a rock. And upon this rock will I build my church, and never will the powers of darkness overwhelm it." Jesus was pleased with his disciple for relating to the question on its deepest level. Reason could not have given Peter that answer. The answer came through the faculty of soul intuition and proved him thereby to be a spiritually advanced disciple. It was his intuitive perception, that insight which cannot be shaken by tempests of reasonable doubt, that Jesus praised in referring to him as a rock. The church he referred to next was the edifice of cosmic consciousness. Any outer church institution would have to depend, as in fact the Christian churches have always done, on the level of understanding of its individual leaders and members. Peter's intuitive perception could never have been passed on to an outward succession of prelates. Clarity comes by direct soul perception. Confusion results from excessive dependence on reason as the guide to understanding. As the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita states, when your intellect, at present confused by the diversity of teaching in the scriptures, becomes steadfast in the ecstasy of deep meditation, then you will achieve final union with God. Thus, through Holy Scriptures, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning again to all of you and all of you. The subject for this morning, the title is Reason versus Intuition. So we're going to have a debate about which is superior. Now, I am the lawyer, the advocate for the reasoning mind, the superior mind, the thinking, rational, planning, decision-making mind. The mind that distinguishes us from the animals. I'd like to, while I'm waiting for my younger sister, I'd like to read to you something that Master has said about the power of reason and thought. Master says, "In this short span of life, by the power of your thought, You can go faster than the airplane, faster than all animals, and be more powerful than any mechanism man has invented. You are made in God's image, and He gave you the indomitable power of thought. So, I am going to be the advocate for the supremacy of thought and reason, while my younger sister here is going to be the advocate for intuition, you know, these wishful, airy-fairy thoughts. Well, we'll hear from her after a while. Do you want to make an adjustment?
Yeah, only that she sits here because the mic is here.
Ah, okay.
I'll be standing up when I talk.
Yeah, okay. Let's look a bit at what the power of thought and reason has wrought through history. And we can see that it is the supreme aspect of our lives. I'm going to start with Da Vinci. And many of you, all of you, are probably familiar with the enormous breadth, the scope, the depth, the power of his mind and his reason. He invented, at least theoretically, the helicopter, which centuries later was actually produced according to his designs. He even had a design for an airplane with wings. Da Vinci's mind was so powerful that he thought of an underwater diving machine that we call now the scuba diving. Okay. And it was made, as I said, many centuries later, based on his designs. Da Vinci devised a portable bridge. Now you might ask, what's the use for a portable bridge, you know, that can be put together and taken away? Well, it was for military purposes, so that an army can go to a river, put up the bridge, and then take it down so nobody could follow them. Da Vinci devised also a parachute. You know, maybe he devised the parachute first and then the airplane, you know, so that people could jump down. Anyway, if you haven't looked at the designs of Da Vinci, we know him as an artist, and he was a great artist, but he was a great mind. He was a scientist, an inventor, an engineer, even an architect. And if you ever have the chance to see mostra, thank you, an exposition of his in your city or online, I highly recommend it. Well, about the same time that Da Vinci's great mind and reason was operating, a contemporary or almost contemporary of his was Brunelleschi. Now, Brunelleschi did something that we all know about. He not only designed, but he built the dome that is over the cathedral in Florence. Now, that cathedral was started in the year 1215. It was made, it took them a long time to construct it, but then it was left for over a full century without a roof, because nobody had the mind that could figure out how to put something over that huge structure that didn't have a central support. That Duomo was built to hold 30,000 people. That's how big it was. And so Brunelleschi, with his great power of reason, went to Rome, studied the Pantheon that was built by the Romans. He stayed there, I think, over a year, and he came back with the ideas of how to build that dome. Not only did he do it, but he also invented, designed, and constructed the mechanisms that were necessary to transport the materials up and up and up to that height. He invented a transport from the waterways to bring the bricks and the marble to the site. I mean, he designed everything that was needed and did not exist at that time in order to build that wonder. And he did it, and it exists today as one of the greatest engineering feats in all of history. It contains, I think, over 4 million bricks, which he himself designed so that they would interlace in the right way. It weighs 25,000 tons. And it has no central support. What a mind. What a powerful reason. Well, there are great writers who had fabulous minds. I'm thinking of Jules Verne. I'm thinking of H.G. Wells, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, around the world in 80 days, The War of the Worlds, The Time Machine. What great minds these people had, and have inspired scientific developments in the years that have followed their writings. A scientist, a woman scientist, I think we're in International Women's Week, so I want to mention Maria Curie, the physicist and chemist. She was the first woman to get a Nobel Prize, and it was in physics. And she is the only woman, perhaps the only person, who has ever received the Nobel Prize in 2 disciplines, and the second one was chemistry. What does it take? Not just intuition or airy-fairy thoughts, but it takes the power of reason to bring these things into manifestation and to give benefit to all of humanity. A bit closer to our time, I just can't resist but mention one of a person who I admire greatly, and this is Nikola Tesla. Okay, Tesla, who has 300 patents in his name. That's how inventive he was. He invented so many things, many of them for which he didn't get credit. But every time we turn the light on in our house, every time we use the vacuum sweeper, every time we dry our hair, every time we use a remote device to open a gate or to change the channels on a television, that is thanks to the great mind of Nikola Tesla. And we come to our present day. And by the way, none of these people had personalities that were very easy to get along with, but their minds were great. So speaking of personalities that are not easy to get along with, we have Elon Musk, who is the great mind of our modern times, and his electric car, and that he gives credit to Tesla for the invention, and the SpaceX, the rocket that's carrying satellites and stations, and might someday be exploring and even colonizing other. What minds these people have. And just on a very practical level, I was surprised to learn that it was Elon Musk who invented PayPal. So every time you use PayPal, you can think of the great mind who invented it. All right. I'd like to tell just a little personal story about the power of reason. Many years ago, already decades ago, we started the Yogananda Academy of Europe. And it started out with two schools, the School of Ananda Yoga and the School of Ananda Meditation, or Raja Yoga. And we developed the curriculum. So one day I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, you know, 2's the number of duality, 3's a better number. So let's have a third school. And I thought, well, for all of these years, we have been teaching the Yogananda's teachings on self-healing. So let's develop a school for self-healing. And we call it life therapy. And so, from that thought that a third school would be useful for people, and we already had all of the materials that we needed, I just sat down and planned out the whole curriculum. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, you know, the courses, the teachers, created study materials of literally over 100 pages for each one of the courses. And this is what we do today. We have all 3 of these schools thanks to the ability of reason to hold on to an idea, an objective, make the decisions that are necessary, plan out the steps to get there, and eventually to get there. Now, I don't really know how powerful this intuition is, but I will give time to my younger sister to support this other aspect of the mind called intuition.
Thank you, Shivani. That was a very reasonable presentation. But with all due respect to my elder sister, I must disagree. Intuition is much more important than reason. Intuition is everything. In the reading, we heard Jesus saying, or Swami that wrote that Jesus, when he was training his disciples, like all great masters, encouraged them in the development of a higher faculty, soul intuition. For it is only by intuition, these are his words, it is only by intuition that spiritual perceptions are achieved. Swami defines intuition as the innate ability to perceive truth directly, not by reason, logic, or analysis, but by simple knowing from within. Intuition means knowledge that is inside, inner knowledge. Reason and logic are faculties of the conscious mind, the part of our mind that receives impulses through the senses, elaborates that information, and then works with it and decides how to act. It's a very useful faculty, certainly, but it's limited. It's limited to what it can perceive through the senses and what it remembers from past experiences. It's based on delusion because sensory experience is delusion. It's Maya. It's duality. And it's also greatly influenced by the subconscious mind, which manifests as our preferences, our likes and dislikes, our emotional reactions. Intuition, on the other hand, is a faculty of superconsciousness, which is located here in the spiritual eye, and of feeling, which is located in the heart. Feeling is more powerful than reason. In fact, Yogananda said, reason follows feeling. Feeling can always influence our reason. In the reading, Swami says quite clearly that clarity comes by direct soul perception. That is, through intuition, which is the faculty of the soul. He also adds that confusion results from excessive dependence on reason as a guide to understanding. As I said, intuition is everything. So let's look at a few examples of the power of intuition. And we'll start with Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds of this epoch, this period, the last century, but this time period, whose inventions and whose influence have basically changed the world. And when he came up with the theory of relativity, he didn't think about it and reason, well, there's mass and there's time and there's energy. No, it came to him in a flash. E equals mc squared. He just knew. It came to him through intuitive perception, through contact with his superconscious mind. And then it took him years using his mental capacity to explain it, to make it comprehensible to his colleagues, to other scientists, to explain it logically so that they could also understand it. This is one of my favorites. This is in the mid-1800s, Elias Howe was the first inventor, well, let's say the second inventor, because somebody did something like that in the 1600s, of the sewing machine. And then later, Isaac Singer improved on his model, but he was the one that came up with basically the design of the sewing machine that was first powered by foot pedals and then eventually by electricity. He'd been working on it for a long time and pretty much had the whole thing together, but he couldn't figure out the needle. Because in a sewing machine, there's a thread on the top and there's a thread underneath, and they have to connect with each other. And the needle, he made the needles the way needles had always been made, with the eye of the needle on top and the point at the other end. And that's the kind of a needle that you use for hand sewing. But it didn't work for the sewing machine because the thread was too high. It wouldn't connect with the thread underneath the fabric. And so he thought and he thought and he thought, and he really tried hard with his mind, which was a brilliant mind, to figure it out. But he just couldn't. So one night, he had a dream. And in that dream, he went to a country which was full of very hostile, savage people. And the king of that country had ordered him to create a sewing machine, and he had to do it in one night. And if he didn't finish it by the dawn, he would be killed. So he tried and he tried. Actually, the king gave him 24 hours, which is still not very much time. And he just couldn't quite get it. And so finally, at the end, the soldiers came to take him away to be executed. And he noticed they were all holding spears with these big points at the top. And he noticed that there was a hole in the point of every one of those spears. And at that moment, he woke up. And I'm sure he just went, oh my goodness.
Eureka.
Eureka. It was 4 in the morning. He went straight to his laboratory, and by 9 o'clock, he had created the first needle with the hole in the point, which of course is why sewing machines work. Also, I have to talk about Thomas Edison, another wonderful mind, brilliant inventor. But he knew that there was something else beyond the logical mind, which in his case was a brilliant mind. He knew that there was another state, which we know as superconsciousness, but he didn't know what to call it. And he knew it was sort of halfway between the awake state and the sleeping state. And he devised a way to enter into that state voluntarily. He would sit in a comfortable armchair and totally relax, letting himself drift towards sleep. But he held in one of his hands a few metal balls. And below his hand was a metal plate. And so he would relax and go deeper and deeper, and just as he was going into subconsciousness, his hand would relax and the balls would drop to the ground and the noise would wake him up. But he, in that way, was able to access that state between the conscious and the subconscious mind. And that's where he found a lot of his inspirations for his inventions. Pretty amazing. So the last story I want to share is the story of a very, very dear friend of mine whose name is Vinaya. She gave me permission to use her name. Several years ago, Vinaya was diagnosed with breast cancer. And she had been told of this one particular doctor, specialist, who was very well known, very famous, and said to be a very good surgeon for this kind of condition. And so she and her husband, they made an appointment. They went to see this doctor. And as soon as she walked in, she just felt like something wasn't right. There was a sort of a dissonance. She didn't feel comfortable. But and she expressed this to her husband, but he was, of course, very worried about his wife, and he really encouraged her to go ahead and see this doctor and to do all the preliminary tests that were necessary. So they did that, and then they had to wait for paperwork because here in Italy everything moves very, very slowly, especially when it comes to bureaucracy. And she still had this strange feeling. Then she went, after she had all the papers, she went back to this doctor, and he refused to see her. He said, "No, I'm too busy. You have to come back another time." And this reinforced the feeling that she already had. This is not the right doctor for me. So she told her husband this, and he, of course, was very concerned, and he kind of pushed her a little bit to go back to this doctor, even if she had to wait. But she just felt, no. Her feeling was so strong that she even resisted her husband's advice. So that night, when she was meditating, she offered it up to Yogananda, to her guru, and she said, "I want your will, not mine. I want to understand what I really should do. Please write to me what you want me to do." She said that, "Please write to me." And then she went to sleep. The next morning, she and her husband came here to the Temple of Light for meditation, yoga and meditation. And when they returned home, they saw that someone had slipped a note under their door. And she immediately said to her husband, "This note is from Master." The note was from her dear friend Laura, with the name and address of another doctor in another town who was also very, very highly regarded. He wasn't rich, wasn't famous, but people that knew him knew that he was really, really good. So she went to him, and she had the surgery. Everything was fine. She is healthy and happy now. Everything is perfect. Here's the kicker. A few months after her surgery, she heard that in the same time that she would have had surgery with this doctor, he performed 2 other similar surgeries, and both of them had serious complications. And in fact, he is under, at that point, he was under investigation. And so she realized that that intuitive feeling that she had come from God. And following that feeling very possibly saved her life. So I think these stories have demonstrated that intuitive perception is superior to reason. However, to be fair, Shivani, you made a very good point. Many very good points.
Thank you.
Especially describing your rational process, your reasoning, your very logical progress to creating the School of Life Therapy. And it's very successful. You did a great job. I just have one little question. Where did that first idea come from to start the school? Did it come entirely from your mind?
Well, little sister, you might have made some good points. In fact, you made some very good points and some very good stories. And perhaps we don't really need to go any further into what is superior, reason or intuition, because I think by now it's clear that they work together. Reason that is not informed by intuition can go astray. It can take us down roads that don't lead to what we are hoping for. We can waste a lot of time. We can waste years. We can waste an incarnation because our reason gives us a premise. The premise doesn't hold up, but we follow it and we don't get anywhere. On the other hand, intuition that just remains at the level of feeling and is not put into practice in our lives just remains nice thoughts. We can have all kinds, in our minds. We can have one. What was it? Walter Mitty, I think, is a play, I think, by Arthur Miller, about someone who just always had nice thoughts, but never accomplished anything. So to answer your question, little sister, where did that thought come from? And now I'm writing a book about life therapy. And some months ago, when I started, the first 2 days, I sat down and wrote an outline for the entire book. It's a huge book. It's going to be about 400 pages. I wrote the whole thing. Just, it came. And now, when I go back and I try to use that outline, I see that it's just a mental construct. And that every day when I ask for intuition, it comes and it overrides that outline and it takes its own course. So for all of us, each one of us, we need to be open to intuition. And the very reasonable way to do that is to ask for it. Because what we ask gets answered. Jesus said that. Ask, and the answer shall be given to you. So, in every single undertaking, any project, any decision that we need to make, any health situation that we need to deal with, we want to, in the calmness, ask for the inspiration. I asked Swami Kriyananda once, I remember it very clearly. We were just walking somewhere, just he and I. I think we were here, actually. And I just said to him, Swami, where does intuition come from? Is it born in the mind, or is it born in the heart? And I remember very clearly his answer. He said, when the mind is calm and the emotions are still, intuition is born. And then, when the intuition comes, we give it over to our reasoning, our executive mind that can deal with it and plan and make decisions. But the reasoning mind needs a right direction, and that will come only through intuition. So, little sister, can we agree to help each other? Okay. Well, many blessings to all of you. I hope you enjoyed this debate. I enjoyed it greatly. I always wanted to be a lawyer, so now I get to at least do it for this one day.